Hey everyone, Future Bill here. So I actually started this project, 4 or 5 weeks ago, something like that. And I got about halfway through it and then I was waiting on parts. So now that I got all the parts in, I can continue with the project. So keep watching and I'll see you guys in a few minutes. What's going on everyone? Welcome back to the channel. So today I think I'm finally going to try to do something about my wonky gauges in the D100. I mean, my speedometer doesn't work. You know, I've tried tearing it apart, cleaning it. I've bought a new cable, made sure it was lubed, all that stuff. Speedometer just doesn't work. It just goes all over the place. Plus with that 46RH, I'm gonna be running an electronic speedometer. So this thing would have to go anyway. My water temp gauge, that doesn't work. I think I actually blew that one up while messing with the voltage regulator here on the back of the gauge. So that doesn't work. My fuel gauge, it works. Is it accurate? I don't know. About the only thing that really works in the original gauge cluster are all the lights and the oil pressure gauge. So this thing's gonna go. So the first thing that I gotta do is I wanna make a template off of the original gauge face, the original cover. That's gonna allow me to make a piece that'll fit inside the original dash pad or the original gauge housing on the dash. So that's the first thing I'm gonna do. So here I made this template out of chipboard. I get this stuff at an art supply store. I get it in different thicknesses, and for large sheets, it's like $1 or $2 for a good size sheet. And depending on the template I'm making, I get thinner stuff. I have to make something that's, you know, got a curve a little bit. This is a little bit thicker just because I want it to be a little more rigid in making this template. But this will allow me to really dial in the shape that I need to fit inside this existing dash cover. And that way I can, you know, utilize all the original mounting holes and I can get everything lined out here first before I transfer it over to the 18 gauge sheet metal. So for long straight cuts or something with maybe just a gradual curve to it, I like to use these sheet metal shears. I got this one is actually from Home Depot, but there are plenty of different ones out there. These things just make cuts like this quick, easy, and pretty accurate. So I did cut my piece of sheet metal here a little oversized compared to the template. Once I trace it out, I will cut a little on the large side. That just gives me room to work the panel to size that I want instead of accidentally maybe cutting it too small. Also, I know I want to add a flange here to the bottom, and it'll just be easier to break with some excess, and then I can trim it to fit later. So I'm going to get the template traced out and get it cut out. Now that I've got the panel fitting up inside of the cover pretty much how I want it, I mean, it still needs a little fine tweaking, but overall it's fitting really well inside the cover. With that done, I can start laying out my gauges. Now, I took my template and I laid out all my gauges here. I don't know how well it's gonna show up here on the camera. All my gauges on my template. I laid out, you know, I found the center line, and then I laid out the speedometer, tack, and then all the other gauges. And I got some measurements on here so that I can reproduce this on the panel. What I did was, for the two larger gauges, for the speedo and the tack, I just took a compass and I set it to the radius of the hole needed for that gauge. And then I measured, you know, again, on the center line where I wanted those gauges to go. I just took the compass, put it on there, use that to kind of scratch the chipboard to get a good circle of where that's going to lay out. For all the smaller gauges, there are 2 1/16 gauges. So what I did was I made a template, and this is actually the size of the entire gauge, bezel included, not just the hole needed. And then you can see there I marked the center hole. And then what that allowed me to do was just, I could move this around based on spacing and everything, and I can get it exactly where I wanted it, and I knew exactly how much space it was going to take up on the cover. If I had set this for just the hole size, then I could have maybe been too close to other things, and it just they wouldn't have fit right. They could have hit each other. They could have hit, you know, this area up here. So I wanted to make sure that I made my template the overall size. Now I know that when I drill the hole, which is smaller than that, everything will fit exactly how I want it to. So with that done, my nose is running, it's cold. I took all those measurements, and I laid everything out here on the panel. So now I have all my gauge locations laid out. I've punched all the center holes just using where is it? Just using a little spring-loaded punch. Now I'm going to drill a pilot hole for each gauge. And then for all the smaller gauges, I'm going to use, I have a hydraulic punch set from Harbor Freight. I'll leave a link down below to something similar, but I got this whole set from Harbor Freight. I'm going to use this 1 15/16 punch to punch out the holes for all the smaller gauges. It is a little too small, but it's really close. And then once I get those punched out, I'll just have to take like a carbide cutter or something and grind down the hole, make the hole a little bit larger. For the larger gauges, for the speedo and the tack, I'll do the same thing with the largest cutout, and that'll just give me a hole, and then I will probably use a body saw to cut out the rest of the hole. Once I got all the holes cut and clearanced for the gauges, made sure everything fit, I gave the panel a coat of paint. Now, I was just going to go with some flat black, but once I gave it a first coat of that, I wasn't really happy with it. It was just too plain. So I ended up using some of this SEM texture coating. I'm not really sure how well this shows up on camera, but it gave the front anyway just a little bit of texture, a little bit of character, and I'm really happy with that. So, as you can see, I have been installing gauges and doing some wiring. I'm still waiting on a couple of gauges. I've been buying some here and there as money allows. I actually have my tack on the way. I think I have my voltage. My last 3 gauges actually: my tack, my voltage gauge, and I think my oil temp gauge. I don't know if I ordered the oil temp gauge yet, since I'm not really ready for that. But I know the tack and the voltage gauge are on the way. So that's what I've been working on. It's been a kind of a slow process, you know, getting stuff here and there. As far as the wiring goes, so my plan for the wiring is to have it be 3 connectors. So the first connector I have done, this one is switch 12 volts, which I think is, this is the switch 12 volts, which will be power to all the gauges. The orange is actually for all the dash lights, and then the white is ground. And I'm basing all my wiring that I'm using here on the actual wiring in the truck. I'm trying to keep everything as close to the same colors as what's currently in the truck based on wiring diagrams. So that's this one. This connector that I've been working on now has my turn signals, my parking brake indicator lamp, my high beam indicator lamp, which I obviously forgot to ground one, and my speedometer cable. So it's going to be a 6-prong. Leave me one extra that I may use for an overdrive indicator. And then the other plug will be a 6-prong also, and that'll have all the signals for the gauges themselves, for the tach, the oil pressure, all that good stuff will be on the other connector. And the 2 6-prongs will be switched, as far as one side, this one will be like the male, and then for the other 6-prong will be the female, so that you don't get them backwards if you're having to ever remove and reinstall the gauge panel. So that's what I'm going to be working on, continuing on with, is the wiring.
To 6 weeks later.
All right, now that you guys are all caught up, I finally received my tach the other day, and I was waiting on that before I could really wire up this half of the dash, or the gauge cluster, because like I did on the previous side, I daisy chained the switch 12 volts, the power for the lights, and the grounds all together, and they kind of first met here at the tach and then continued over to the other gauges. So like I did on the off the speedometer side, I kind of did the same thing across the back, starting with the tach. The voltage comes in from the harness, the grounds connect to the tach, and then everything daisy chains off of that. But as you can see, it's all wired up. All my connectors are installed. This thing is just about ready to go into the truck. So let's go out to the truck and I'll show you the wiring that I'm doing on that side. Neighbor's dog is yippy. All right, so here you can see just what I've got going on the truck side. So here's the original connector that went to the rear of the gauge cluster. And I've been just kind of working along. I got everything labeled as far as what's what, been cutting free what I need and adding new connectors. So this one has my switch 12 volts, my voltage for the dash lights, and ground. This one has, my speedometer, my voltmeter, and my turn signals, high beam indicator, and parking brake light. And that's a 6-pin. I'll be also using another 6-pin for the remaining connectors. So that's gonna be like my coolant temp, my oil pressure, fuel level, tach, oil temp, and trans temp. Now, because this one is a 6-pin and this one's going to be a 6-pin, I'm actually, whereas this one's a female, I'm using a male for the other one, and that way there's no confusion. I don't have to worry about getting them switched if I ever have to remove the dash again. So I'm just going to continue with getting this wiring done. All right, so I've got all the wiring is done. I've got the gauge cluster just kind of sitting in place. I think I'm still going to have to do some clearancing to the actual metal dash itself. I think there's some tabs that are going to need clearancing, but I'll find that out more once I go to do a permanent install on this thing. But to show you guys, turn it on. Parking brake indicator is on. Let's see. Left turn signal. Right turn signal. I don't know if you can see that. Let me pull you in over here. There you can see the left turn signal's working. I turned the headlights on, so you can't really see it, but the gauge lights do come on. They're just really hard to see. But more importantly, turn the high beams on. High beam indicator works. You can see the voltage gauge comes up. The water temp gauge moved. Fuel level is indicating. This is not correct, and I think it has to do with the sender in the tank. I actually have a new one of those coming. I believe that one might be, even though it's new. It's eBay new. I actually have about half a tank, and this is only reading just above a quarter. So there's definitely an issue there. But the trans temp moved. So it looks like, and the speedometer does its little thing when it first turns on, but you can see the odometer actually has a reading there. So yeah, everything looks like it's working as it should. So obviously there's more that needs to be done to get that new gauge cluster fully finished. I mean, I still need to do a speedometer calibration. I need to work on the cover. Still some cleanup needs to be done to that. But once that stuff's fully done, I'll be able to bolt it in. I'll finally be able to get rid of this janky old thing. So I appreciate you guys for watching. Hit that subscribe, hit the bell, and I'll see you on the next one.